ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us after the lunch break for the second session about digital democracy. We have speakers Miloš Kovačević, Bianca Ferrazza, Dominic Spada, and Bruno Frutosa Costa, who is joining us online. So Miloš Kovačević from the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, will speak about combination of psychometric techniques and big data analytics, rigging the political elections theater. Very long topic. I hope we can make it very clear and crisp for our audience today. Oh, sorry. Online deliberation and personal identity. My mistake. Yes, please, if it is not already turned on.
Can you hear me? Okay, my topic is online deliberation and personal identity. I will first give us a little bit of introduction. So both offline and online deliberation require the fulfillment of certain criteria in order to qualify as a rational and democratic discourse that contributes to the legitimacy of the political decision-making process. In the first part of the paper, I will discuss 4 of them: inclusiveness, rationality, ideal role-taking, and sincerity.
Yes, sorry. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell me.
Okay. Unlike a typical offline setting, online setting for deliberation is able to offer anonymity to deliberators. So deliberators are participants in deliberation. Considering its strong and mixed influence on the quality of online deliberation, the role of personal identity is surprisingly under-researched. Therefore, in the second part of the paper, I will show how anonymity reflects on each of the previously mentioned deliberative criteria and assess its influence on the quality of deliberation. So let's start with inclusiveness. This criteria covers accessibility. So everyone who will be impacted by a policy should be given the same chance to participate in a deliberation. Diversity among deliberators, however, is not a guarantee of inclusivity on its own because their contributions to deliberation can differ greatly. The equal opportunity to provide arguments and challenge claims made by other deliberators is also required by inclusivity. It is crucial that every claim is treated equally and has the same chance to be discussed. Accessibility is often determined through structure of relevant socioeconomic characteristics such as age, gender, or education among deliberators. These characteristics might reveal whether some group of people are underrepresented or overrepresented, and in that way we can identify shortcomings in inclusivity. On the other side, inclusivity on a communicative level is typically assessed through deliberator involvement rates, which can reveal potential problem of dominance of small number of deliberators. Next criterion is rationality. So it is generally acknowledged that in deliberative communication, arguments and empirical data are used to support different views. The core of deliberation lies within the exchanging and challenging of reasonable arguments. Only through this do deliberators get the opportunity to change their minds in response to a stronger case. There are 3 common approaches to estimate the rationality of deliberation: coherence of discourse, argumentational level, and sourcing. When it comes to coherence of discourse, rational deliberation requires topic relevance. An analysis of lines of discussion can show whether deliberators stay on the topic or not. Measuring level of argumentation could be approached in two ways: quantitative, counting the instances arguments were made during the deliberation, and qualitative, considering what kind of arguments are formulated within deliberation, namely the quality of provided evidence. And that brings us to sourcing. This measure captures whether deliberators provide or require external information of sources, such as media articles, empirical evidence, data, studies, etc. Ideal role-taking is the next criterion. So to grasp the viewpoint of the other, deliberators should try to put themselves in the other's shoes. Such a process requires commitment to ongoing dialogue in which deliberators respectively listen to one another in spite of their differences. Ideal role-taking includes mutual recognition of the deliberators in the sense that everybody is acknowledged as an equal actor able to speak in their own manner. This mutual understanding is the cornerstone of rational consensus building, which includes respectfully hearing both sides and remaining open to being persuaded by others. All this requires showing respect and empathy toward others, which is typically measured through lack of it. So through various instances of disrespectful language toward others. Sincerity is the last criteria that we will discuss. So each deliberator should make a genuine effort to disclose all relevant information, including their true intentions, interests, needs, and desires in relation to specific problem under consideration. This relates to absence of manipulation and deception. And the criterion of sincerity and the criterion of ideal role-taking are cardinal evaluative criteria of deliberation. And that means that even if other deliberative criteria are met, a discussion cannot be considered deliberative if sincerity and ideal role-taking are not present. The content-based analysis allows us to assess apparent traces in lack of sincerity, while survey questions and interviews reveal deliberators' perception regarding the presence and level of sincerity among other participants in the discussion. So now we go on effects of anonymity on each of these criteria. So when it comes to inclusiveness, the main advantages of online deliberation over offline deliberation are greater flexibility and lower costs. It makes particularly suitable for responding to the high degree of inclusiveness in the public sphere that the deliberative democracy requires. Due to deliberators' anonymity, online deliberation increases efficiency in engaging in deliberation. Nevertheless, offline status is often directly reinforced by its revelation that is readily brought into online settings by the deliberators themselves. Some scholars question the possibility of avoiding disclosure of deliberators' identity, bearing in mind various signifying mechanisms that indicate the very language that may reveal the class, culture, and gender. Furthermore, even when the offline identity is not revealed, the deliberator develops online authority that is linked to real-life privileges. The ability of individuals to assert authority online is linked to the extent of resources they possess, which are necessary for success online. Consequently, online dynamic make a new type of cyber power that is parallel to offline power relations. When it comes to rationality, anonymity shifts the focus to what is being said rather than who is saying it, which contributes to rationality. So avoiding ad hominem argumentation and neutralizing inequality based on the liberator's identity. Furthermore, increased anonymity may allow individuals to engage with others who hold opposing views by providing some form of protection if one responds with an unpopular or contrary opinion. Online deliberation seemed to encourage rather than inhibit emotional expression. The deliberators express their emotion more explicitly in online communication than in offline interactions because they are less afraid of repercussions, especially in anonymous setting. This phenomenon is known as the online disinhibition effect, and the distinction is made between benign and toxic online disinhibition. Greater online anonymity has been linked to a higher risk of toxic online disinhibition, which includes the use of disrespectful, hostile language, such as swearing, insults, and even threats. This explains why it may be more common on Twitter than on Facebook, given the former's platform permissive identification rules. However, there are some interesting pieces of research that suggest how it is not anonymity per se contributing to toxic online disinhibition, but lack of eye contact between deliberators, which strictly speaking is neither necessary nor sufficient for anonymity. While being online, benign online disinhibition can facilitate self-disclosure of hidden identity, and in that way advance the society. Control over self-representation also allows for conscious identity deception. Deception in the deliberation occurs when a deliberator intentionally misleads others into believing that their intentions, needs, desires, and interests have been presented honestly. That is a fairly common issue on the internet. So trolling is identity deception intended to embarrass and disrupt. Although frequently undertaken for amusement, it is sometimes motivated by political goals. Such identity deception undermines trust online. Deliberators may grow cautious about their own revelations and skeptical about the revelations of others. They may even choose to remain silent or withdraw entirely from the community in question. In these ways, trolls can cause a lot of damage to online deliberation. So we are going to conclusion now. Assuming that anonymity of deliberators is successfully established in online discussion, we can conclude that it has an overall positive effect on inclusiveness and rationality, but it negatively affects ideal role-taking and sincerity, with exemptions to limited positive effect that anonymity can have on sincerity of people that are not out. Since ideal role-taking and sincerity are prerequisite for all other deliberative criteria, identification ought to be favored in order to achieve higher quality of deliberation in online setting.
Thank you, Miloš, for your insightful lecture. Now we are turning to the next one, and then we're going to have questions for everyone at the end. The next speaker is Bruno Frutoso Costa from University Institute of Lisbon. Return to censorship, Portuguese perceptions of digital transformation regulation. Okay, Costa. Bruno, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to participate in this Congress with the presentation of the research Return to Censorship, Portuguese Perceptions of Digital Disinformation Regulation. The intersection of disinformation phenomena with the characteristics of social platforms allows disinformation to acquire status of social relevance. So this stems from the impact that the various types of misinformation stimulate at the level of individuals' risks perceptions and assessment. In fact, disinformation also shapes the way one understands and responds to reality situations in a way that individuals end up uncritically accepting disinformation as valid and likewise doubting institutions and political representatives. Whenever information is encoded as true, even if it is later shown to be false, the conviction is hardly changing. Based on the centrality that the media occupied in the COVID-19 pandemic, Ferreira identified in the week after the beginning of the state of emergency a positive and significant association between political attitudes of populism, information on social platforms, and the acceptance of disinformation. Also, trust in traditional media and science-related institutions remains high. The low levels of trust in government institutions pose a democratic vulnerability. On the other hand, Portugal is among the countries with the highest demographic aging and consequently with the lowest rates of schooling and digital literacy, presenting a great permeability to the phenomenon of disinformation. Portugal's position on disinformation is characterized as reactive, limited to seconding the positions taken by the European Union. In mid-2021, the Portuguese Charter on Human Rights in Digital Age, which ensures rights, freedoms, and guarantees of citizens in cyberspace, came into force. Dissatisfaction has set in the public opinion regarding Article 6 on the right to protections against disinformation, which has perceives in the opinion public as a return to censorship. This research aimed to understand what type of perceptions that gave rise to the lack of consensus in the Portuguese public opinion regarding the regulation approved on the protections against disinformation. The analysis is developed from journalistic pieces about the legislation that circulated on social platform Facebook between May and August 2021 in Portugal. The corpus is formed from the comments published in the participatory spaces of 5 generalist references media. So the content analysis is guided by the following research questions. What were the dominant perceptions in the comments published in the context of protection against disinformation, and what type of argumentation was used by individuals with negative perceptions of the law. As shown in table 1, displeasure stands out among the perceptions of the Portuguese about the approval of Article 6 expressed in 56% of the comments. 4 partners of argumentation were identified to express dissatisfaction, reference to government media collusion, reference to censorship, pleased with the mobilization of political actors against the approval of the law, and displeased with the lack of political mobilization. The table 2 also shows that the displeasure comment can be associated with more than one line of argumentation. Regarding the reference to censorship, the sample data show that about 51% consider the law has a setback to the democratic rule of law. They consider that the way in which the terms of Portuguese Charter of Human Rights in the digital age are written may represent restrictions on the individual and collective freedom of expression, especially because indeterminate concepts are used. So we can identify that the Portuguese media regulation system struggles with an inconsistency of models and permanent dependence on the Portuguese Parliament. With 4 generations of experience over 3 decades, the model can be characterized by its disarticulations and conceptual divergences and understandings about its responsibilities. In this sense, the article can be seen to further expand the field of action and power of the regulatory body by also defining the truths for what is said, written, and disseminated by online social media platforms, and also deliberating on sanction regimes to be applied to them. It's expected that regulatory institutions will continue to increase their powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please stay online. And now we can turn to another presentation. We had insightful presentation from Bruno, turning to Bianca Ferrazza. She will speak the long title. Yes.
The long title. Should I read it?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay, so I'll introduce myself. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so actually, I'm Bianca Ferrazza. I'm an Italian student. I study in Brussels. I'm doing my master in international relations. And I'm presenting a part of my bachelor thesis, whose long title is The Combination of Psychometrical Techniques and Big Data Analytics, Rigging the Political Elections Theater. So I apologize in advance as I have a bit of a cold and I might need to cough at times. I hope you don't mind. So giving the introduction to my topic, right now I'm going to talk about the research question I analyzed during my bachelor's degree. It is aimed at understanding the possible connection between personality traits and political behavior, and to thus analyze the potential effects of psychometrical micro-targeting techniques in the political contemporary theater. So as to give a small, okay, okay, just the last slide. I have, next one, okay, perfect, thank you. As to make it like effective as a presentation, I picked some keywords that I will now explain briefly. So I would like to begin giving a short introduction about theories of political behavior, which is how we vote. So how the study of the theories of political behavior basically is having the objective of analyzing and understanding what defines the political behavior of a voter, of the electors, and his ideology. Alongside with that is levels of participation within the political contemporary life and the context of origin of the actual elector. The determination of a voter political behavior is usually dictated by three main theoretical approaches, which have been analyzed by Rui Antunes, who is a researcher at Coimbra Graduate School in Portugal. He analyzes three of these main theories, which are sociological theories. They are focused on the influence in the voter's choice that are displayed by a precise social background, and which is also linked to the concept of party identification. The second theories are psychosocial theories, and those are linked to the study of volatile rather than stable variables in the voter's choice. And they're linked with the study of the University of Michigan that was conducted in 2011 about party attachment. So based on the concept of partnership, which is defined as the attachment that a voter develops towards his party of coming from. And the last theory is the public choice theories. These are used in relation to economic methods, and they're thought to be the most rational theories that we can utilize in political science. The limits are clear. As for this theory, the elector will have to be in possession of 100% true informations and not be influenced by any kind of fake news or social media informations about politics. So the next, oh yeah, sorry. Yes, this one. So the next keywords I want to focus on is psychometrics. I don't know how many of you are familiar with psychometrics, but it is a branch of psychology that focuses on the development of psychometrical science linked to the use of psychological tests that are used to measure as measurement tools for suitable observation of a person's segments of behavior. Psychometric is a subfield of psychology, and it's devoted to the development, evaluation, and practical application of various tests that have been developed in the recent years. It is thus primarily focused on the measurement and theory of techniques of measurement. Generally, psychometric refers to specialized fields that are analyzed with the aim of obtaining measurement of latent concepts that are so-called difficult to analyze, such as intelligence or psychology or a person's personality. So in the 1980s, we have this big update in psychometrics, which is two teams of psychologists developed a model that was called Big Five model. And it was aimed at understanding and assessing people's personality through 5 indicators, which are talked about with the acronym OCEAN. You can see the 5 indicators right here. So we have openness, consciousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. For a while, the problem with psychometrical testing was the amount of work that was behind it. So the amount of data that was required to predict, to make a model, the amount of citizens that had to be interviewed, that had to be data that had to be collected for the test to have a sufficient number of participants. Up until some years ago, indeed, political campaigns, electoral campaigns were focused on rather social demographical indicators rather than psychological, such as one's country of provenance, one's gender, one's age, and maybe if the person was religious or not. So these 5 indicators have been linked, thanks to this team of psychologists, to political affiliations. So for openness, we have people that are rather creative. They show curiosity, they prove to be anti-conformist, and they usually deal well with new information and new approaches to things. And their political affiliation shows to people that are very participant of the public life, of the political life in their own country. They tend to vote for liberal parties, so both economically and socially speaking. And according to Campbell, they believe that voting holds a very important role in one's life. So they believe that voting counts. They're very confident in politics. Then we have consciousness. These people tend to follow social rules and norms. They are rather organized. They think before making a decision, and their political affiliation is thought to be rather conservative, both for social and economical policies. Their vote is often based on strategic, so they tend to vote for the party that might win, even if it doesn't 100% represent what their ideology is. We then have agreeableness, and these people who show to be cooperative, altruistic, understanding of others. They work very well in teams, and they have a liberal view on economic policies and a rather conservative view on social policies. Extroversion shows people that are liberally, both they're socially and economically liberal voters. and they display social skills. They are very good team leaders. So they might even show exuberance. And the last one is neuroticism, which is connected with levels of negativity, anxiety. They are rather uneasy in social context. Their political affiliation appears to be conservative candidates and parties, both economically and socially. So next slide. Okay. So in the 21st century, as many other domains, psychometrical techniques have gained more importance. This is because the starting point of psychometrical testing, like creating psychometrical models, is now social media. Social medias can be defined as these online services that allow creation of virtual realities and common grounds for people to connect in. We have witnessed a growing number of users that share a lot of information on social media. This information can be, in the beginning, social demographic information, so mostly based on one's first language, their age, their gender, and their primary belief, like personal beliefs such as religion. And then to this point, the so-called digital traits that humans are living in the internet are now deemed fundamental in order to understand one's personal information. This research has gone further with Gosling and some other scholars that tried to build a predictive model of the psychometrical profile of a person without the need to submit to have the person take the Big Five test, the Big Five survey. So thanks to social media, and according to Kozinski research, 7 likes there. I'm just going to give you some numbers to make the picture clear. So 7 likes of a person on Facebook that have been analyzed can show better knowledge of the person than their own friends know the person. So 150 likes is enough to know more about the person than their parents do. And 300 likes is proven to mean that this, like the 300 is more than the person knows about themselves. For example, according to Kozinski's research, a person that will like Michael Jordan Facebook's page is thought to be an indicator of extroversion. And the person that would like Leonardo da Vinci's page, that would thought to be an indicator of open-mindedness, so a very open mind. One of the prominent research in this milieu is by Bashar, who has in 2011 collected data from 58,000 people, users on Facebook. And he gave them the Big Five test, and he also got access to their Facebook profiles. The methodology is usually something like this. So we have a test that's given to participants that is about their social demographic statistics. So again, their information on their lives. Then you have 10 questions, because the Big Five test is actually very big. So we've tried, like scholars have tried to make it a little less hard to take. So 10 questions about psychological personality. And then 10 other questions that are about the voters' political affiliation. So for example, the last party the voter vote for, or the propension of ones to vote for one party rather than the other. I'll just switch to conclusions now. Okay. So to this day, few authors have included personality among variables of political behavior methods. It is among the main reasons we have the absence of a general theory of personality and of a standardized measurement personality traits. Indeed, the Big Five model is a predictor of personality, but it only has been widespread in the recent years. And I think, although that a study of personality in particular is particularly interesting in light of contemporary politics, macro trends in today's political communication, specifically when it comes to micro-targeting techniques, which are techniques that are made to deliver the user of Facebook, of Instagram, with echo chambers that reflect his opinions and reflect his data that is being collected by scholars. This, I think you're familiar with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which is basically what has been done using these theories. And according to scholars, Cambridge Analytica would have been able to reconstruct the psychometrical profile of a user without the need to subministrate the Big Five test. So yes, that's.
Thank you. Interesting talk. And we have to hurry up a little bit with the final lecture. of our friend here, Dominic Spada from the American University of Paris, who will speak about digital technologies, individualization, and democracy.
Good afternoon. Does this work? Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes, so I'm focusing in this presentation particularly on the relevance of Alexis de Tocqueville in modern societies, particularly in digital society. And there's three parts really to Tocqueville that struck my attention that is the most relevant. In particular, his extensive dive into the threat of individualization on democratic society, the need for effective communication between political groups, and the equality of condition. And so I mentioned that Tocqueville's one of his biggest threats that he noticed in his book, Democracy in America, was that the anatomization of society, in part created by democracy itself, threatened to tear apart democratic society as we know it. And a big part of this came from the collapse of the communal ties that are encouraged, that encourage the effective communication between competing political groups and social groups. And these are even pulled apart even more as society becomes more equal, not necessarily in economic or social condition, but in our placements among each other. And so it's of my view that technology can really be seen in many senses as the great equalizer. As we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, there's no real assumptions that we can make going just online about each other than what we see as presented to us. There's no easy way to tell someone's social status, whether that be economic or racial, cultural, and the differences that we can make out from each other come mainly from how we either present ourselves or from the discussions that we have among each other. And so this in turn lessens the obligation that each of us has to one another, whether in our communications and our discussions with individuals within our democratic and civic societies, strengthen or reinforcing this breakdown in the obligation that is already inherent to democratic society. And so this transitions into how our transition into this digital civic society, one that is largely controlled by private actors. Of course, the big ones, Google, Twitter, Meta, etc., being the main governors of this digital world, collapsing this divide between the public and the private that is so inherent to democratic society and is essential really for effective civic engagement. And this transitions how we engage in a democratic and political sense from something that's inherently public, whether it's this traditional Tocquevillian Northeastern American town hall style debate, to this really privatized discussion that happens on a day-to-day basis amongst different individuals. And so civic engagement really is now defined today through fewer collective ties, fewer group interactions, and now defined as an individualized one-on-one interaction on this new digital agora that's really developed on these private bulletin board platforms, transitioning the public discussion onto this private platform and bringing a private platform and private life into a very public sense. And this, once again, further reinforces this breakdown of the community that Tocqueville established as so essential to effective democracy. And so this ties in further into this general trend of democratic backsliding that has been so apparent over the past decade and a half, but really exacerbated since the COVID crisis. And a lot of these transitions onto a strictly digital world in a lot of senses. And these general trends in backsliding are highlighted mostly by decreased voter turnout across democratic societies, decreasing media independence, both in actuality and in perceived independence, and finally by an explosion in political polarization across the spectrum. Now, these ills in backsliding in democratic society are really spread hugely by disinformation and pushed heavily on digital technologies and digital platforms, which are used not only by individuals to spread their beliefs, but also taken over by political parties and regimes with autocratic tendencies. One of the best examples is the Fidesz party in Hungary, investing heavily before the last election into digital creators on Instagram and on Facebook to push party and state ideologies into the mainstream political spectrum online. And this is a really interesting trend, actually, as historically these more polarized groups would have used more alternative means, more alternative media to spread their ideas and to create their own community in this form of alternative nebulous. But they've really transitioned over the last 15 years into kind of augmented and had their voices spread on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on these very prominent platforms that are used not only by these more polarized radical groups, but also by the entire political spectrum, ranging from the traditional left and right to the center to the extremes on both the left and the right. And enhanced mainly by this shift from group-based prediction making in a lot of senses to a more individualized prediction system, mostly through algorithmic prediction. And these help identify both individuals that may be more likely to engage with these different types of ideologies and different medias, as well as new subgroups within the traditional groups that would have been mainly identified, all based on new data compilations and increasing data compilations gathered and enabled by developing technologies. And this presents a great threat from this shift in power dynamic, both from the between private companies doing so for financial gain and for these more autocratic regimes that know how to manipulate these systems to pursue their ideologies and get them into the mainstream, and to take advantage of an individual, which is inherently easier than taking advantage of the group as a whole. And so this transitions nicely into the discussion on filter bubbles, which we heard a lot about this morning, which play a part, but I will never quite say that they play the full part of this tension between technology and democratic society. But as these browser and platform algorithms pull up and push an ideology, which it's this political ideology that tends to play a more influential role in how algorithms enable their predictions and pursue their predictions over an individual, and create these identity affirming bubbles playing off both the inherent nature of human beings to seek out information that they're comfortable with and environments that they're more secure in, to pulling off of that to really create this nice well-rounded bubble of security for an individual. And it's this continuous optimization, both to keep a user engaged for a private company, for their bottom line, for profit purposes, and then for an autocratic regime or a regime of democratic regime with autocratic tendencies that can take advantage of these. That in addition to normal prioritization for popularity purposes, and hiding of certain content that skews the way an individual can really see the world, and just reinforces these inherent tendencies from human nature. And these challenge primarily this idea from Tocqueville that this inclusive political communication, kind of a Rawlsian sense of ensuring that all political all ideologies from across the political spectrum are engaged and heard from in your day-to-day discourse, to ensure that your individual, you're making decisions fully as an individual, and not having that decision kind of made for you for which information you're really trying to latch onto. And so in conclusion, which I don't have a conclusion page for, but it's not necessarily that these digital technologies are inherently responsible for the democratic backsliding that's occurred over the last 15 years, but that they're playing an inherent role in propagating the backsliding and speeding up the rate at which backsliding is happening, in addition to, in a sense, legitimizing, either from the perspective that individuals are seeing that these ideologies, these more radical and polarized ideologies, are the main general will of the electorate, or that they're just not seeing, and these radical ideologies are in essence hidden from them, that they don't necessarily fully have to believe that they exist, which contribute to this general trend in democratic backsliding. And this breaks importantly from social contract theory, where you're no longer thinking necessarily of the group itself, but you're only thinking of yourself and pulling at the ties of democratic society that are so inherent within the structural foundations of what we all believe are necessary.
Thank you. From philosophy to social science. And there was also psychology, lots of psychology in this session. Thank you very much for this. Now, do you have some questions? It would be great to extend this discussion a little bit more, because we have time.
Around 25 minutes for questions of the audience, either here or online.
Okay, yes, of course. Bruno, Milos, Bianca, and Dominic are here. Bruno is online.
Hello. Wow, that was loud. I have a question for you, the last speaker. Sorry, I forgot your name. What do you think about some people say that there's a balance because like the more you have this digital, like all you explain in your research, but at the same time, the more democratic backsliding that happens, there is a tendency in governments to actually suppress the internet access or limit it. And I got curious to whether you have thoughts or ideas about these dynamics where a free with quotes internet mediated by these platforms is required to maybe accelerate or influence the democratic backsliding, but once that happens, this access gets diminished in many countries, or the internet shifts or changes. And I wonder whether this dynamic, what's potential effect of this dynamic into this whole process, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And so the tension really, you know, across the world, you've got three main types of regulatory regimes around the internet. You've got the US, which is very neoliberal, very, it's very deregulated. There's no central governing agency over the internet. And so you've got really this governance by the private, compared to in China, which is over-regulated in a lot of senses. There's no privacy on, you know, from this other side, from the government, as compared to the US, where there's no privacy from, you know, from Amazon, for example. And then in the Europe, you have this, you know, within the European Union, you have this attempt at regulating and putting in, you know, some of these stopgaps for exploitation of data. And so that's really the balance, is trying to figure, you know, making sure you don't go too far in one direction of having this, you know, kind of wild west of, you know, private, you know, corporate development, so this wild west of, you know, government development, because both of them are ineffective. They're both exploitative. They're both threats. This happens, and you know, happens a lot in China, where they're, you know, developing this, you know, the social credit system where they, you know, can essentially dock you points and, you know, remove your, you know, basic privileges for failing to cross the street at the appropriate time. And that's, you know, whereas in the US, you just can kind of get away with a lot of, you know, varying different things on the internet with few repercussions. And so the balance is ensuring that there's enough space for development for companies, but that they're not exploiting for economic gains, both your data, both your political system, but at the same time, making sure your government's not overregulated and not doing the same exact thing for political control. And it's a tough line. Nobody's really quite been able to figure out where that line is. It's going to be particularly culturally dependent on where the role, where culture views the role of the government, where it views the role of private businesses. But at some point, there needs to be you know, this kind of framework to say, within this spectrum is kind of how we need to govern whether it's, you know, a free government-based internet that, you know, companies can profit off of while maintaining, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of liberty, you know, your basic democratic liberties, with appropriate oversight, appropriate governance. And that's the balance. It's painfully difficult to figure out, though.
So that's why you live in Paris, because of this regulation, which is balanced in European Union.
I'm not going to say that. I won't say that the European Union is balanced. It's more balanced. It's, you know, the oversight mechanisms that the European Union has put in are particularly effective against private businesses, but generally across the board fail at reining in the government effectively. The French government since 2012 has passed a number of different laws across a variety of different, both military planning laws to national security laws to just, you know, basic policing laws that include surveillance regimes. So I won't quite go so far as to say that Europe is balanced, but it's a step in the right direction.
And what about big tech? Is that regulated anywhere in the world?
It's
in a meaningful way, because
that's it right there.
Our targets are you know, companies, commercial interests, but they're just small players.
Yeah, no, they're, again, the General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union does its job against everybody but the big companies. It's, Facebook has been fined 4 times this year, over 250 million euros. 3 of those by the Irish Data Protection Agency. So they've, in a sense, kind of worked in these fines into their bottom lines of something that they can pay and still profit off of. because they're just so big and they make so much money that it's worth it to them to pay these fines and still violate some of these regulations. And so the balance then is figuring out how to make it fair for small, SMEs that make up, in the European Union, they make up 99% of businesses. But while also being, allowing them to operate and still be profitable within the digital economy, but at the same time balancing those big companies which can easily get away with the 4% fine that is the highest that you can go under GDPR.
Yes. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. A fascinating set of talks. I have a question for Bianca. Yeah, fascinating topic. I mean, you say, there's a potential to create a psychometric profile with 7 likes based on social media. And we all know the debate with Cambridge Analytica and so on and so forth. But I wonder, what is the academic evidence or the really sound academic evidence for the accuracy of micro-targeting? Because we have regulations in Europe on the one hand, and we also have, you see it mistargeting, that the targeting may not be accurate. You may receive ads by opposing parties that you actually don't like, and so on and so forth. So if you take away the fact that targeting is a key mechanism in advertising, always has been, so targeting your right groups, would you really say this is a totally new phenomenon given the evidence we have? The academic evidence we have, not the evidence that kind of based on news reports or what companies tell us, but the academic evidence of how accurate and therefore how potentially dangerous this targeting is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I do not think it's a groundbreaking phenomenon, as of course you said, targeting campaigns have always been like that. It's been like that throughout all the 20th century. Campaigners have always tried to interest the voters. It was before, of course, via surveys and not by online targeting. I think the real potential danger of online micro-targeting is that it is accessible to more and more people. So there are less people that get information, and there's more. It's actually like, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon's attention theory. So the attention theory is basically describes attention as a very scarce resource. And when we have a very scarce resource in the world we're living in with hyper-reality and the way people pay attention to things, the more influences we have, the more stimulus we have from outside, the more the voter will get influenceable. So once upon a time, you had 2 main newspapers, for example. One was rather left-wing, one was rather right-wing. And the voter would base the choice on what they were reading. Now, psychometrical techniques, psychometrical micro-targeting is not per se extremely dangerous, but the proliferation of social media and the way users get in contact with information, the frequency in which people are bombarded with information, it all fits inside a bigger picture, which is the whole internalization of things, let's say. So you have the attention economy, you have attention becoming smaller and smaller for people. You have young people being targeted by very political messages, which was not the case ages ago. You have a constant being in touch with this information because you get a notification on your phones 40 times every day saying it's breaking news, it's breaking news, it's breaking news. And you do get those based on the likes you put on Facebook, you do get those based on the people you follow even. So I don't think it's dangerous per se as just this little thing, but in the whole picture, I think it can pose a very dramatic danger because of course it's like very widespread now. Everyone has a phone, everyone has social media. There is no one that kind of receives, let's say, rational information, let's say truthful informations all the time. But we do have regulation in the European Union. They are working on regulations in other countries as well. It's not something that is to be considered as the newest phenomenon. I think just in the bigger pictures, it does poses major threats.
Yes, thank you very much. Imagine traveling into the future 50 years from now and seeing the world of extremely stupid people. So this may happen if the technology shape us in this way for us. Many Homer Simpsons. Okay, sorry for my crazy remarks. I'm famous for that. Okay, I try to verify my image. Okay, now thank you very much for this. Let's have a break, 15 minutes break. Oh, really?
We still have 5 minutes.
We still have time. And Claudia just joined us. Your students had amazing presentations here, and we had interesting questions. Maybe something about philosophy for our first speaker of the day. Do we have or anything you might imagine? We have 5 minutes more.
5 to 10 minutes more.
Wow.
But okay. There are no more questions from the audience. Matteo. Okay. Here you are.
Yeah, sorry, still about your talk, Bianca. Yeah, so you were saying that I'm not aware of this psychometric scale, not so much at least. So knowing the endorsing pattern of a person, you may avoid running the test, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the thing is that you should know the whole liking pattern of a person, and for instance, have a label for what he likes. Like Leonardo da Vinci is, I don't know, open-mindedness. In my opinion, this may scale up very badly when you have multiple pages, multiple groups, some stuff that it's hard to label and so on. So are you aware of other methods that can scale up better for measuring the same thing, essentially?
There is one method that has been used in Bokrack research when it was targeting 15,000 people. Of course, he was getting access to a lot of data. So he had many likes on Facebook to analyze. He had many people to analyze. He had many connections to make between the ocean model and the psychometrical techniques. And he did use a model of reduction. I don't recall the name, but I can look it up. I'll tell you just after the presentation. Which is basically a model that reduces the amount of data, but still maintains the most significance of the data. So you get less data, but you get the same kind of relevance of the data for the person. So there are these kinds of models that are being developed in order to facilitate the research, as it's, of course, a very huge research.
Okay, thanks.
Else? Okay.
I have a question to the first speaker about anonymity, which is quite interesting concept, and we have discussions with students about anonymity all the time, and in computer science major. Well, if we live in the world where a person can be identified by several clicks, likes, by patterns in the text and so on, would it be fair to talk about anonymity in the case when a person uses social media or other websites? And would it be fair, in your opinion, would it be ethical to protect a person from the research in psychometrics, which gives such information, which is capable of doing that? Will it be potentially possible? Well, pardon?
Revoking assets,
yes.
Tech companies to take our data.
Yes. So basically, I understand that maybe it's the question also to the second speaker. So
the first speaker and the second speaker.
Yeah, I understand that it can be related to both, because the question of anonymity and disclosure, this micro targeting, they are quite opposite.
Yes, Milos had some introduction about anonymity, and we're interested to hear what a philosopher thinks about this anonymity online. Should it be governed by some regulation like Data Services Act? Does it make sense?
So I analyzed the effects of anonymity on these four criteria for a quality, for a good deliberation. So, and at the end, I concluded that identification is finally trumps anonymity, in the sense that two criteria that are more important, that have a special status, and that is ideal role taking and sincerity, are negatively affected by anonymity. So in that sense, it doesn't follow that it's such a big problem that, you know, if you identify participants in any way, through micro-targeting or in any other way, to identify participants, because we should know identity of every deliberator. So, okay, possibly there could be some arguments why we should, how we could save anonymity in that sense. But for now, I think that that identification is a better route for having better deliberation. So,
thank you. So you are in favor of digital identity, I would say, in some way. Everybody needs to be recognized and have responsibilities and right online, I guess. This is one idea, one school of thought. What about Bianca? Because you presented your lecture about psychometrics, which was really interesting. Do you think that that people should have the right to revoke access to their data and should have the right not to have digital identity? Something I spoke with Claudia, or we exchanged some emails about that.
I believe so. I believe one should have the right to revoke its data, and I believe one should have a right not to own a personal identity. Especially it's hard nowadays not to have a personal, not to have a digital identity, as it's proliferated a lot in the last years. But I do believe that one should have access to their own data, and it should be made easier to re-access their own data, because right now finding a big tech company is quite impossible. Taking to court a big tech company is deemed impossible. So yeah, I do think so.
And what about kicking people out of social media? Should that right be led to social media or someone else in the society?
Well, social media are private actors, so there goes another kind of
But isn't is it also a kind of a marker, predictor, when a person is revoking the data from social media? Can it also be used to have this kind of categorization? And again,
yeah, of course, it's a double-edged sword. A person claiming to revoke its own data from a big tech company is surely a person that shows some kind of indicators, psychologically speaking. Now, I haven't researched that, so I don't know which kind of indicators could be linked to that, but surely it is a double-edged sword.
Better don't touch anything. Anyone else? Okay, so let's have a coffee now.
Okay, just one more housekeeping item. So we continue our program at 3:15. We have two parallel sessions. One will be here and it's on cyber order. The other one is on the first floor. It's on post-digital art and culture. Thank you very much.